A reading from the second book of Maccabees. Eleazar, one of the foremost scribes, a man of advanced age and noble appearance, was being forced to open his mouth to eat pork. But preferring a glorious death to a life of defilement, he spat out the meat and went forward of his own accord to the instrument of torture, as people ought to do who have the courage to reject the food which is unlawful to taste, even for the love of life. Those in charge of that unlawful ritual meal took the man aside privately because of their long acquaintance with him, and urged him to bring meat of his own providing, such as he could legitimately eat, and to pretend to be eating some of the meat of the sacrifice prescribed by the king. In this way, he would escape the death penalty and be treated kindly because of their old friendship with him. But Eleazar made up his mind in a noble manner. Worthy of his years, the dignity of his advanced age, the merited distinction of his gray hair, and of the admirable life he had lived from childhood. And so he declared that above all, he would be loyal to the holy laws given by God. He told them to send him at once to the abode of the dead, explaining, "At our age, it would be unbecoming to make such a pretense. Many young people would think the 90-year-old Eleazar had gone over to an alien religion. Should I thus pretend, for the sake of a brief moment of life, they would be led astray by me, while I would bring shame and dishonor on my old age? Even if, for the time being, I avoid the punishment of men, I shall never, whether alive or dead, escape the hands of the Almighty. Therefore, by manfully giving up my life now, I will prove myself worthy of my old age, and I will leave to the young a noble example of how to die willingly and generously for the revered and holy laws." Eleazar spoke thus, and went immediately to the instrument of torture. Those who shortly before had been kindly disposed now became hostile toward him because what he had said seemed to them utter madness. When he was about to die under the blows, he groaned and said, "The Lord in his holy knowledge knows full well that, although I could have escaped death, I am not only enduring terrible pain in my body from this scourging, but also suffering it with joy in my soul because of my devotion to him." This is how he died, leaving in his death a model of courage and an unforgettable example of virtue, not only for the young, but for the whole nation. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The Lord upholds me. O Lord, how many are my adversaries? Many rise up against me. Many are saying of me, there is no salvation for him in God.
The Lord upholds me.
But you, O Lord, are my shield, my glory. You lift up my head. When I call out to the Lord, he answers me from his holy mountain.
The Lord upholds me.
When I lie down and sleep, I wake again, for the Lord sustains me. I fear not the myriads of people arrayed against me on every side.
The Lord upholds me. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. At that time, Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. Now a man there named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was. But he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for I today must stay at your house." And he came down quickly and received him with joy. And when they saw this, the crowd began to grumble, saying, "He's gone to stay at the house of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood his ground and said to the Lord, "Behold, half my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor, and if I've extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost." The Gospel of the Lord. Two brief homilets, one on the feast, one on the readings. On the feast, if it's a professor of theology whose life we're celebrating today with Albert the Great, I should make some kind of a remark about books, it seems to me. And so the best remark about a book that I can think of in this context is, don't judge a book by its cover. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest theologians the church has ever known, was one of Albert's students. His fellow students referred to Thomas Aquinas as the dumb ox. No doubt because he was a big boy, nice, heavy set. There's all kind of tradition about Aquinas being slightly overweight. And because he never said anything. He was too busy listening. And Albert says, look, don't judge the book by the cover there. This dumb ox, that's what you want to call him? His voice is going to fill the world when he starts talking. And with the Summa, it pretty much did. So that's a thought. Let's not judge books too much by covers. Now we look at the story of Eleazar during the persecutions that the Jews experienced in the 2nd century BC, which led to the destruction of the temple, the Maccabean revolution, and the rededication of the temple, which is what the Jews celebrate every December as Hanukkah. So this is the kind of lead-in that we're getting here. Eleazar is not going to eat pork. They're trying to force him to eat pork. Okay. How do you know the old saying about don't sweat the small stuff, and by the way, it's all small stuff. How do you know when the small stuff is involved? In the long run, eating pork is not one of what you call the central tenets of Judaism. It is nowhere near as serious, for example, as respecting the Sabbath. Nowhere near as central, for example, as loving the Lord your God, not committing adultery, not committing murder, not bearing false witness. These are the central dimensions of the faith. So why not just have a bit of bacon and get it over with, Because the reason is, this isn't a small thing. We did a play years and years and years ago, kind of a semi-musical play called Genesis. And it was written by a nun. It was basically the story of Adam and Eve. And after Eve eats the apple, God, through an angel, is confronting her. It was the angel actually confronting her. And they have this dialogue, and she's crying about it, And she says, "It was a little thing," meaning the apple. And the response of the angel is it a little thing to disobey your God? That's what would be going on here, because to eat pork became symbolic of either holding on to or giving up the entirety of your religion. And so Eleazar is not going to do it. He's not going to give it up, because it's not a small thing after all. It's a central thing. How do we understand the practice of our faith? Do we see where things are central? Do we see where things are really important? Do we understand that large portions of our faith are built on the small individual steps that we take? So today, the inspiration of Albert teaches us, let's not judge book by covers. And today, the example of Eleazar, let's understand that bottom line, obedience to God, love of God is really what is central in our faith. Let us stand and pray.